The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy and life. But what happens when something arrives that exists outside that web, something that doesn't seek balance or power, only consumption? The Clone Wars had already torn the Republic apart, pitting clone against droid across 1,000 worlds. Yet in the unknown regions, beyond the carefully mapped hyperspace lanes and Republic outposts, a different kind of war was beginning, one that recognized no governments, acknowledged no treaties, and showed no mercy to any form of biological life. The agricultural colony of Sentinel-4 went silent on a Tuesday. It wasn't unusual for Outer Rim settlements to experience communication disruptions, pirates, solar interference, faulty equipment. The Republic Navy, stretched impossibly thin by the Separatist crisis, logged the incident and moved on. There were more pressing concerns. General Grievous had launched a new offensive in the Mid-Rim. Count Dooku's forces were besieging 3 Republic strongholds simultaneously. One silent farming world barely registered. By Friday, 7 more colonies had gone dark. The pattern finally reached the Jedi Temple on Coruscant when Commander Cody transmitted an emergency signal from the Outer Rim world of Cato Neimoidia. The message was brief, fragmented, and terrifying. Unknown hostiles, not droids, not separatists. They're eating everything. In the temple's central meditation chamber, Master Yoda's eyes snapped open. The ancient Jedi had felt it for weeks, a wrongness spreading through the Force like frost across glass. Not the calculated malice of the dark side, but something worse, an absence, a void that consumed light and dark equally, leaving only silence behind. Master Yoda? Mace Windu stood at the chamber entrance, his expression grave. The Council is convening. The 212th Attack Battalion is requesting immediate reinforcement. Yoda rose slowly, his Geimer stick clicking against the polished floor. Feel it, do you? The shadow that grows? Windu's jaw tightened. I feel nothing. Where these attacks occur, the Force goes quiet. Our precognition fails. It's as if entire star systems are disappearing from our sight. Disappeared they have not, Yoda said softly, his ears drooping. Consumed they are, by something that hungers. Across the galaxy, on the Separatist flagship Invisible Hand, Count Dooku stood before a holographic display with growing unease. General Grievous's mechanical voice crackled through the speaker. Count Dooku, our forward positions on Sentinel-4 have ceased all transmissions. I dispatched a droid reconnaissance force. They found organic residue, structures dissolved, no survivors. Dooku's fingers tightened around his curved lightsaber hilt. Through the Force, he sensed his master's distant presence, Darth Sidious, lurking in the shadows of Coruscant. And for the first time in years, Dooku felt something unexpected from the Sith Lord: concern. General, Dooku said carefully, dispatch additional forces. I want full intelligence on what destroyed that colony. As you command. But Count, the droids that returned reported something else. Biological entities, thousands of them, moving in coordinated swarms. They seem to be learning, adapting to our weapons even as we... The transmission died. Dooku stared at the empty hologram projector for a long moment. Then he activated his personal comlink, the one connected directly to his master. My lord, he said quietly, we have a problem. On Cato Neimoidia, Clone Captain Rex crouched behind the shattered remains of a Republic gunship, his DC-15A blaster rifle trained on the tree line. The jungle had gone silent 10 minutes ago. No birds, no insects, nothing. General Skywalker, Rex spoke into his comlink. I don't like this. Something's watching us. Anakin Skywalker ignited his lightsaber, the blue blade humming in the unnatural quiet. Beside him, his former Padawan Ahsoka Tano did the same. her twin white blades casting pale light across the clearing. "I feel it too," Anakin said. "But it's not the Force. It's like hunger. Pure, mindless hunger." The jungle exploded. They came in waves, creatures that defied classification. Some scuttled on multiple legs like massive insects. Others flew on leathery wings, shrieking with voices that weren't quite animal. Their carapaces gleamed with bioluminescent patterns, and their claws tore through clone trooper armor like flimsy. Rex opened fire, his blaster bolts punching smoking holes through chitin and flesh. The creatures didn't retreat, didn't even slow. More poured from the jungle, trampling their own dead. "Fall back!" Anakin shouted, his lightsaber blurring as he carved through the swarm. "Get to the shuttles!" But as Rex ran, he saw something that made his blood freeze. One of the creatures, wounded by blaster fire, was changing. Its carapace thickened, darkened. When the next volley struck it, the bolts ricocheted harmlessly away. They were adapting. And there were millions more coming. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The Republic shuttle broke atmosphere with half its hull plating missing and 3 engines sputtering on emergency power. Anakin Skywalker gripped the co-pilot seat as Rex wrestled with the controls, Cato Neimoidia's green canopy shrinking below them. Through the viewport, Ahsoka counted the gunships limping into orbit behind them. They'd landed with 12. 7 were returning. "General, we've got a problem," Rex said, his voice tight. "Something's following us." Anakin leaned forward. Against the black of space, organic shapes moved, massive writhing things that pulsed with bioluminescent veins. They weren't ships. They were alive. Creatures the size of cruisers, propelling themselves through the void with undulating membranes and spurts of expelled gas. "That's impossible," Ahsoka whispered. "Nothing lives in vacuum." The lead creature opened what might have been a mouth. A gout of superheated bioplasma lanced toward them. Rex yanked the stick hard, and the shot vaporized empty space where they'd been seconds before. "Tell that to them!" Rex shouted. The fleet's flagship, the Resolute, appeared through the clouds of debris. A Venator-class star destroyer bristling with turbo-laser batteries. Admiral Wolf Yularen's voice crackled over the comm. "All Republic forces, get clear. We're engaging the hostiles." The Resolute's cannons opened fire, crimson bolts tearing into the bioships. Carapace exploded. Ichor boiled into vacuum. But for every creature destroyed, 2 more emerged from Cato Neimoidia's upper atmosphere. They moved with disturbing coordination, spiraling around each other in patterns that seemed almost intelligent. On the Resolute's bridge, Yularen watched his tactical display with growing horror. "They're not attacking randomly. They're probing our defenses, testing firing ranges." Anakin and Ahsoka materialized beside him, still in scorched armor. "Admiral, we need to establish a perimeter," Anakin said. "Whatever those things are, they're consuming everything on the surface. If they reach the civilian centers..." "The civilian centers are already gone, General." Yularen's fingers trembled over the display controls. "Long-range scans show nothing but organic matter covering 90% of the planet. Structures, vegetation, people. All of it being broken down and absorbed." Ahsoka's montrals flattened against her head. "How is that possible? We were only on the surface for 6 hours." "Because they're not just killing," a new voice said. Master Obi-Wan Kenobi strode onto the bridge, his expression grave. "They're harvesting. Every scrap of biological material is being converted into more of them. Exponential growth." Anakin's jaw clenched. "Then we glass the planet. Orbital bombardment. Burn it all before it spreads." "Already considered," Yularen said quietly. "But look at this." He expanded the tactical display. Red markers, thousands of them, appeared throughout the outer rim. These are all colonies that have gone silent in the last 72 hours. The invasion isn't centered on Cato Nemoidia. It's happening simultaneously across 24 systems. Obi-Wan's hand drifted to his beard, a gesture Anakin recognized as deep concern. The Jedi Council believes this is a coordinated attack. But coordinated by what? These creatures show no signs of technology, no communications we can intercept, yet they move with perfect synchronization. On the view screen, one of the bioships convulsed, its carapace split open, birthing dozens of smaller organisms that immediately accelerated toward the Republic fleet. Point defense cannons tracked and destroyed most of them, but 3 impacted against the Resolute's hull. Alarms shrieked. "Hull breach! Sections 42 through 45!" a clone officer reported. "Something's inside the ship!" Rex was already moving, his blaster rifle in hand. "I'll handle it." "We're coming with you," Anakin said, igniting his lightsaber. The breach site was a nightmare. The hull plating had been dissolved, not torn, melted away by some kind of acidic secretion. Through the emergency bulkheads, they could hear scratching, clicking. Sounds that shouldn't exist on a starship. Rex positioned his troopers in a firing line. "Steady! Wait for visual confirmation." The bulkhead exploded inward. The creatures were smaller than the ones on the surface, roughly human-sized, but infinitely more terrifying up close. 4 legs, 2 scything claws, eyeless heads that tracked movement through some other sense. Their carapaces were already darker than their planet-side cousins, adapting to the blaster fire they'd encountered. The clones opened up. Bolt after bolt slammed into chitin. The creatures shrieked and charged. Anakin met the first one with his lightsaber, the blue blade carving through its thorax. It died, but its body didn't stop moving. Nerve clusters still firing, claws still slashing. Ahsoka had to decapitate it twice before it finally went still. "They don't feel pain!" she shouted over the blaster fire. "They don't feel fear!" More organisms poured through the breach. Rex's ammunition counter ticked toward empty. Behind them, crew members were sealing blast doors, sacrificing sections of the ship to contain the infestation. Then, as suddenly as it began, the attack stopped. The surviving creatures retreated back through the breach and launched themselves into space. The clones held their fire, confused. Obi-Wan's comlink chirped. Yularen's voice was shaken. "Generals, you need to see this." On the bridge's main view screen, the bioships were withdrawing, not fleeing, withdrawing in perfect formation. And as they descended back toward Cato Nemoidia, the planet's surface writhed. New structures were growing. Towering spires of living matter that pulsed with that same bioluminescent light. "They weren't trying to destroy us," Obi-Wan said softly. "They were studying us, learning what we are." Anakin stared at the screen, watching an entire world transform into something alien and hostile. "Then we just taught them how to fight Jedi and clones." "Worse," Yularen said, pulling up telemetry data. "We taught them how to fight in space. And General Skywalker, those bioships, they're splitting, reproducing. By the time they reach the next system, there will be twice as many." The bridge fell silent, except for the hum of the Resolute's engines and the distant wail of damage control klaxons. They had just met something the galaxy had never faced before. Something that learned. Something that consumed. Something that would never stop. The Jedi Temple's council chamber had never felt so small. 12 seats arranged in a circle, each occupied by a master whose wisdom had guided the Republic through centuries of conflict. Yet as the holographic reports flickered in the center of the room, world after world consumed, fleets shredded, entire populations vanished. Even their combined experience offered no answers. Master Yoda sat with his eyes closed, his breathing shallow. Around him, the Force churned with disturbance. Not the sharp sting of dark side corruption, but something fundamentally wrong, where the affected system should have shimmered with the light of billions of living beings, there was only emptiness. A void that expanded with each passing hour. The situation deteriorates faster than we can respond, Mace Windu said, his voice cutting through the chamber's heavy silence. 3 more agricultural worlds have gone dark. The Senate is demanding answers we don't have. Ki Adi Mundi leaned forward, his elongated head casting strange shadows in the holographic light. Our precognition fails completely in the affected regions. It's as if the future itself is being devoured. We cannot see what these creatures will do next. Because there is no future to see. Plo Koon's filtered voice carried an edge of unease. Where they spread, possibility collapses. There is only hunger, only consumption. Obi-Wan Kenobi stood before the council, still bearing scorch marks from Cato Nemoidia. Masters, we're not dealing with an invasion in any conventional sense. These organisms don't conquer, they assimilate. Every battle we fight teaches them. Every world we lose feeds them, and their numbers grow exponentially. Shown mercy, they have not, Yoda said softly, his eyes finally opening. Negotiation, impossible. Surrender, meaningless. Consume all life they will, until nothing remains. Shak Ti's hologram flickered. She was calling from Kamino. The cloning facilities have doubled security, but Masters, we must consider the implications. If these creatures reach Kamino and acquire clone genetics... She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Anakin Skywalker, standing beside Obi-Wan, clenched his fists. Then we need to hit them harder. Concentrate our forces, stop reacting, and start attacking. With what forces? Mace's tone was sharp. The Grand Army is engaged across 200 systems fighting the separatists. We cannot simply abandon those fronts. The separatists are the least of our concerns right now, Anakin shot back. Are they? A new hologram materialized. Admiral Tarkin, his angular features set in calculation. General Skywalker, while you were engaged on Cato Nemoidia, Separatist forces launched coordinated strikes on 3 Republic strongholds. Count Dooku is still prosecuting this war. We face enemies on 2 fronts now. Obi-Wan stroked his beard. Unless the Separatists are experiencing the same attacks. Admiral, have we received any intelligence on Separatist losses to these organisms? Tarkin's expression flickered with something like respect. Our spies report mass casualties. Several droid foundries in Separatist space have ceased production. It appears these creatures make no distinction between Republic and Separatist. Then perhaps, Obi-Wan said carefully, this is an opportunity for dialogue. The council chamber erupted. Masters spoke over each other, voices raised in argument. The idea of negotiating with the Separatists, with Dooku, was anathema. 3 years of bitter warfare couldn't be set aside so easily. Enough! Mace's voice cut through the chaos. He turned to Yoda. Master, you've been silent. What does the Force tell you? Yoda's ears drooped, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made even the most senior masters lean forward. A vision I have seen, terrible and clear. If united against this threat, the galaxy does not stand. Consumed it will be. Republic, Separatist, Jedi, Sith. Distinctions these creatures do not make. Biomass we all are. Nothing more. The chamber fell silent. But united, even possible is that, Yoda continued. Trust the Separatists. We cannot. Trust us. They will not. And in the shadows, his ancient eyes fixed on something none of the others could see. Another presence there is, watching, calculating. The Sith Lord we seek. This chaos serves his purpose, perhaps. On Coruscant's sub-levels, far beneath the gleaming Senate towers, Chancellor Palpatine stood alone in his private chambers. Before him, holographic displays showed the same reports the Jedi Council reviewed. But his expression betrayed no concern, only fascination. "Fascinating," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "An enemy that cannot be corrupted, cannot be turned, cannot be controlled." His lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. How inconvenient. Darth Sidious had spent decades orchestrating the Clone Wars, carefully balancing Republic and Separatist forces, ensuring the conflict would weaken the Jedi while strengthening his own position. Every battle, every death, every political crisis had been calculated. But this? These creatures from beyond known space? They were chaos incarnate, unpredictable, uncontrollable. For the first time in years, Darth Sidious felt something unfamiliar, uncertainty. His comlink chimed, Count Dooku's hologram appeared, and even through the blue static, Sidious could see his apprentice's distress. "My master, the situation spirals beyond control. These organisms have consumed 6 separatist foundries. General Grievous lost an entire droid fleet engaging them. They adapt to every tactic, every weapon. We cannot—" "I am aware of the situation, Lord Tyranids." Sidious's voice was cold. "Tell me, what does the Techno-Union propose? What Tambor suggests a temporary ceasefire with the Republic, to consolidate forces against this threat." Sidious was quiet for a long moment. His plans, his grand design, all of it depended on the Clone Wars continuing until the Jedi were weak enough to destroy. But if these creatures consumed the galaxy first, there would be nothing left to rule. "Initiate contact with the Jedi Council," Sidious said finally, "through unofficial channels. Propose a limited armistice in the affected sectors. But Lord Tyranids, ensure our most vital assets remain protected. Kamino especially." "As you command, my master." Dooku's hologram flickered out. Alone again, Sidious stared at the tactical displays. Red zones spreading like infection across the galaxy map, and in the Force, that terrible absence growing larger. "Let them fight," he whispered to the empty room. "Let Jedi and Separatists bleed themselves dry against this threat. And when the dust settles, when both sides are exhausted, then the Sith will inherit what remains." But even as he spoke the words, Darth Sidious wondered if there would be anything left to inherit. In the temple meditation chamber, Yoda felt the disturbance ripple through the Force. The Sith Lord was moving, adjusting his plans, and beyond that, growing closer with each passing hour, the shadow continued to spread. "Blind we have been," Yoda whispered to the empty chamber. "To the true threat, our eyes were closed. And now, too late it may be to open them." The Separatist research facility on Hypori was a fortress of durasteel and automated defenses, built to withstand Republic assault. General Grievous stalked through its sterile corridors with 4 lightsabers mag-locked to his belt, trophies from Jedi he'd killed. Today, those sabers remained unlit. He had a different kind of prey in mind. Behind reinforced transparasteel, in a containment cell that would hold a rancor, 3 of the creatures writhed. They'd been captured on Agamar after consuming an entire droid battalion. Grievous's mechanical eyes tracked their movements with cold calculation. "Report!" he commanded, his voice a metallic rasp. The lead Geonosian scientist clicked nervously. "General, preliminary analysis reveals unprecedented biological complexity. The organisms possess no centralized nervous system. Decision-making appears distributed throughout their bodies. They demonstrate problem-solving abilities, rapid adaptation, and—" "Can they be weaponized?" Grievous interrupted. The Geonosian hesitated. "General, I must advise caution. These creatures show signs of—" "Answer the question." We We believe so. If we can isolate the adaptation mechanism, replicate it in our battle droids, then do so. Grievous turned to leave, then paused. And dissect one. I want to understand how it thinks. The Geonosian's wings buzzed with distress, but he obeyed. 2 battle droids entered the containment cell, electrostaffs crackling. They targeted the smallest creature, attempting to separate it from its companions. The organisms didn't panic, didn't flee. They attacked. The smallest creature lunged with impossible speed, its scything claws punching through droid chassis like flimsy. The other 2 moved in perfect coordination, flanking and destroying the second droid before it could transmit a warning. The transparasteel observation window, rated to withstand thermal detonators, began to fracture under focused strikes. Grievous's hand moved to his lightsabers. Seal the facility. Purge that section with fire. But the Geonosian wasn't listening. He stared at his scanner, mandibles clicking frantically. General, the organisms, they're signaling. Electromagnetic pulses on multiple frequencies. They're calling for... The facility's outer wall exploded inward. Bioships, dozens of them, descended through Hypori's atmosphere like falling meteors. They hadn't been detected on approach. No hyperspace signature. No engine emissions. Just organic tissue that somehow propelled itself across the void and now descended with lethal precision on a facility they shouldn't have known existed. Grievous watched through external cameras as the swarm landed. Thousands of organisms poured from the bioships, different than the captured specimens, larger, more heavily armored. Some carried what looked like biological ranged weapons, firing spurts of corrosive bile that melted through battle droids. They evolved, Grievous said, his mechanical voice carrying a note of something almost like respect. The species learned from previous encounters and modified itself for assault. The facility's automated defenses activated. Turbo laser batteries swiveled and fired, obliterating dozens of organisms. But the swarm adapted in real time. Surviving creatures grew thicker carapaces, moved in unpredictable patterns, used destroyed bioships as cover. They weren't just attacking, they were learning from every defensive measure. General, we must evacuate! The Geonosian scientist shrieked. Grievous drew all 4 lightsabers, the blades igniting in a cascade of stolen colors: blue, green, yellow, purple. No, we fight. If these creatures want a battle, I'll give them one they'll remember. He charged into the swarm like a mechanical hurricane. His lightsabers became blurs of plasma, carving through chitin and flesh. Organisms fell by the dozens, their acidic blood hissing as it splashed against his duranium chassis. But for every creature he killed, 3 more emerged from the bioships. Behind him, the facility's droid garrison formed firing lines. Blaster bolts and lightsaber strikes filled the air with ozone and burning organic matter. The battle should have been one-sided, hundreds of droids against mere biological organisms. But the creatures fought with a coordination that transcended individual survival. They sacrificed themselves to create openings. They adapted tactics mid-battle. They learned, and they were winning. A massive organism, easily 4 times the size of the others, emerged from the largest bioship. Bony plates covered its body like natural armor. Multiple eyes tracked Grievous with disturbing intelligence. When it roared, the sound wasn't bestial. It was a call to arms. The swarm responded, their attacks becoming more coordinated, more precise. Grievous met the creature head-on. His lightsabers carved deep gouges in its carapace, but it didn't fall. Couldn't fall. It was too massive, too heavily armored. A scything claw caught Grievous across the chest, sending him crashing through a durasteel wall. Warning klaxons blared in his audio receptors. Structural damage, fluid leaks. Nothing critical, but the creature had hurt him. That alone was remarkable. The Geonosian scientist appeared on his internal comlink, transmitting from the evacuation shuttle. General, analysis of the large organism shows elevated bioelectric signals. We believe it's a command unit. coordinating the others through some form of psychic link. Grievous processed this information in microseconds. Then if I kill it, the swarm loses coordination. In theory, but General, that creature's carapace is... Grievous didn't wait for the scientist to finish. He launched himself at the massive organism. All four lightsabers driving toward what scanners identified as its primary nerve cluster. The creature tried to block, but Grievous was faster. The blades punched through armor, through flesh, through whatever passed for its brain. The organism collapsed. For exactly 3 seconds, the swarm froze. Then the remaining creatures retreated with military precision, dragging their dead, including the massive command organism, back to the bioships. Grievous watched them go, his optical sensors tracking every movement. They weren't fleeing, they were withdrawing, regrouping, and they'd taken their casualties with them. They're consuming their own dead, the Geonosian transmitted from orbit, recycling the biomass. And General, our scans show new organisms already being spawned inside those bioships, larger, faster. Each generation improving on the last. The bioships lifted off, leaving Hypori's research facility in ruins. 70% of the droid garrison destroyed. The facility's weapons now understood and countered. And somewhere in those retreating bioships, the swarm was already incorporating what it had learned. Grievous deactivated his lightsabers, his mechanical frame still sparking from the creature's strike. Around him, the few surviving droids stood among smoking ruins and pools of acidic residue. He opened a secure channel to Count Dooku. "My lord, I have engaged the organisms in direct combat. They can be killed, but... Dooku's hologram appeared, his expression unreadable. "They learn faster than we can adapt. Every tactic we employ, they counter within hours. Every weapon we use, they develop resistance to. My lord, if we do not find a way to stop their evolution..." Grievous paused, something he rarely did. "Even the separatist military cannot sustain a war of attrition against an enemy that grows stronger from defeat." Dooku was silent for a long moment. "Then perhaps, General, it is time to consider alternatives to direct confrontation. Return to the flagship. We have received an interesting communication from the Jedi Council." "The Republic?" Grievous's voice dripped with contempt. "The galaxy faces extinction, General. Even ancient enemies must recognize when a greater threat emerges." Dooku's hologram flickered. "Besides, let the Republic and its clone army bleed against these creatures while we preserve our strength. When the dust settles, we will be positioned to..." The transmission cut out. Grievous stood alone among the ruins, watching the last bioship disappear into the clouds. In the distance, he could hear more of them landing. Hypori had 3 billion inhabitants. By tomorrow, Grievous suspected, it would have none. Chancellor Palpatine stood before the Galactic Senate, his aged face a mask of solemn concern. The massive chamber buzzed with 1,000 voices, senators from across the Republic demanding answers, protection, action. Above them, the Senate's central platform rotated slowly, holographic displays showing world after world consumed by the organic nightmare spreading through the outer rim. "My fellow senators," Palpatine's voice carried through the chamber's acoustics, silencing the crowd. "We face an unprecedented crisis. Not a political enemy, not a military adversary, but a force of nature. One that recognizes no borders, no treaties, no mercy." Senator Bail Organa of Alderaan rose from his delegation's pod. "Chancellor, what is the Republic doing to combat this threat? 17 worlds have gone silent. Billions are dead or missing. The people demand safety," Palpatine interrupted smoothly. "And safety requires difficult decisions, which is why I have authorized the Jedi Council to pursue unconventional solutions." The Senate chamber erupted. Senators shouted over each other, demanding clarification. In the Jedi observation box, Mace Windu's jaw tightened. Palpatine had just publicly committed the Jedi to a course of action without consulting them. The Chancellor has opened communications with Separatist leadership, Palpatine continued, his voice rising above the chaos. A temporary cessation of hostilities in affected sectors, so that Republic and Separatist forces may coordinate against this common enemy. The chamber fell silent. Then the shouting began again, twice as loud. Senator Orn-Free Ta of Ryloth's headtails twitched with agitation. The Chancellor proposes we negotiate with terrorists? With the very forces that have killed millions of Republic citizens? I propose we survive, Palpatine said coldly. The Clone Wars are a political conflict. This is extinction. If we do not set aside our differences, there will be no Republic left to defend, no Separatist confederacy to oppose, only silence and emptiness where civilizations once thrived. In the Jedi box, Obi-Wan whispered to Mace. He orchestrates this beautifully, positions himself as the voice of reason while forcing us to ally with our enemies. And we have no choice but to comply, Mace replied grimly. Because he's right. The alternative is annihilation. The vote was called. The motion passed by a narrow margin. The Republic would pursue a temporary armistice with the Separatists to combat the organisms. The Jedi Order would serve as intermediaries. As the Senate session concluded, Palpatine returned to his private office. Alone, his expression of concern melted away, replaced by calculating coldness. Everything was proceeding according to design, though not his original design. These creatures had forced an adaptation to his plans. But Darth Sidious was nothing if not adaptable. His holo-transmitter activated. Count Dooku's image appeared. The Republic has agreed to the armistice, Sidious said. You will meet with the Jedi at the neutral station Valor's Rest. Negotiate in good faith. Allow them to believe cooperation is possible. And the organisms, my master? Let Republic and Separatist forces engage them together. Study how they fight. Learn their weaknesses, but preserve our most strategic assets. Kamino, Geonosis, the core foundries. When this threat is contained, we will be the only faction with intact military capacity. Dooku hesitated. Master, what if the organisms cannot be contained? Sidious was quiet for a long moment. Then, my apprentice, we will need to consider more extreme measures. The Force is powerful. These creatures exist outside its touch, yes. But that may be their weakness. We shall see. The transmission ended. Sidious stood alone, feeling through the Force the shadow that continued to spread. It was a void, yes, an absence where life should be. But voids could be filled, and Sidious had spent a lifetime mastering the manipulation of the Force itself. If these creatures thought themselves beyond the power of the Sith, they would learn otherwise. On the neutral station Valor's Rest, Jedi and Separatist representatives met for the first time since the Clone Wars began. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. The station's conference chamber had been designed for peace negotiations that never came. Now it would host a different kind of discussion. Obi-Wan Kenobi stood across from Count Dooku, the former master and apprentice regarding each other with old familiarity and new suspicion. Anakin remained behind Obi-Wan, his hand never far from his lightsaber. General Grievous lurked in the shadows, his mechanical breathing the only sound as delegates filed in. Master Kenobi, Dooku said with a slight bow. It has been some time. Not long enough, Anakin muttered. Obi-Wan raised a hand. Count Dooku, I appreciate your willingness to meet. Given the circumstances are extinction, Dooku interrupted. Pleasantries are unnecessary. Let us discuss tactics. For the next 2 hours, the chamber became a war room. Holographic displays showed the affected sectors. Republic intelligence reported 23 worlds lost. Separatist intelligence added 17 more. The organisms weren't just consuming, they were accelerating. Each world fed the swarm, creating exponential growth. Our conventional weapons are increasingly ineffective. Grievous said, his voice mechanical and emotionless. The organisms adapt to repeated tactics within hours. Blasters, missiles, even lightsabers. They develop countermeasures. Then we need unconventional approaches, Mace Windu said. The Jedi archives contain records of ancient threats, bioweapons, nanovirus plagues, forbidden technologies. As does the Separatist database, Dooku added. The Geonosians experimented with biological warfare during the Hook War, techniques considered too dangerous for deployment. Obi-Wan stroked his beard. Are we truly discussing using weapons of mass destruction? The collateral damage would be less than total extinction, Dooku finished. Master Kenobi, your moral qualms are admirable but irrelevant. These creatures will not negotiate. They cannot be reasoned with. We must fight fire with fire. The chamber fell silent. Finally, Admiral Yularen spoke from the Republic delegation. Even if we develop such weapons, deployment would take weeks. The organisms are spreading faster than we can mobilize. At current rates, they'll reach the core worlds within a month. Then we need to slow them down, Anakin said suddenly. All eyes turned to him. We can't stop the spread yet, but we can create bottlenecks. Blow hyperspace lanes. Mine the approaches to critical systems. Force them to advance through predetermined routes where we can concentrate our forces. Grievous's mechanical eyes focused on Anakin. A scorched earth strategy. Sacrifice outlying systems to protect the core. Do you have a better idea? Anakin shot back. The chamber erupted in argument. Republic senators objected to abandoning entire systems. Separatist leaders demanded their holdings be protected. Jedi Masters debated the ethics of calculated sacrifice. Through it all, Dooku and Obi-Wan remained silent, each recognizing the same terrible truth. They were losing. Finally, Mace Windu's voice cut through the chaos. Enough! We implement General Skywalker's strategy while developing weapons capable of sterilizing infected worlds. Count Dooku, your scientists will share all biological warfare research with Republic intelligence. In return, we grant you access to Jedi medical archives. Agreed, Dooku said without hesitation. Then we have a plan, Obi-Wan said quietly. May the Force be with us all. We'll need it. As the delegates departed, Dooku and Obi-Wan remained alone in the chamber. The former master and apprentice regarded each other across the holographic display showing the galaxy slowly being consumed. Do you truly believe we can win this? Dooku asked. Obi-Wan was silent for a long moment. I believe we must try. The alternative is unthinkable. The alternative, my old friend, may already be inevitable. Dooku's expression was unreadable. Tell me, when you look into the Force now, what do you see? Obi-Wan closed his eyes, reaching out through the Force. The shadow was vast now, spreading like ink through water, and at its center, something watched. Something vast and hungry and utterly alien. Nothing, Obi-Wan whispered. I see nothing at all. The mining world of Ord Mantell had been chosen for its strategic location, a natural choke point along one of the major hyperspace routes leading toward the core worlds. If the organisms could be stopped anywhere, it would be here. Republic and Separatist forces gathered in orbit, their fleets maintaining a cautious distance from each other even as they prepared to fight side by side. Anakin Skywalker stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching Separatist frigates maneuver into defensive positions. It felt wrong standing alongside ships that had killed so many of his brothers, but Rex stood beside him, and his captain's voice carried quiet conviction. Strange times, General. Never thought I'd be coordinating with clankers. Neither did I, Anakin admitted. But if we don't stop these things here, there won't be any brothers left to fight for. The first bioships appeared at the system's edge. Organic silhouettes against the stars, moving with purpose that defied their lack of visible propulsion. Sensors counted them. 200, 300, 500. They kept coming. an endless tide emerging from hyperspace coordinates that shouldn't support biological matter. "They've learned to navigate hyperspace," Admiral Yularen said, his voice tight. "Without technology, they're doing it instinctively." On the Separatist flagship, General Grievous watched the same display with cold calculation. Beside him, a hologram of Count Dooku flickered. "General, the Republic forces are in position. You may begin your assault." "With pleasure." Grievous's mechanical hand swept forward. "All batteries, open fire." The combined fleet unleashed hell. Turbolaser fire from Republic Star Destroyers joined the barrage from Separatist frigates. The void lit up with coherent energy beams, missiles, and plasma bolts. Bioships exploded by the dozens, ichor boiling into vacuum. But they kept coming. "They're not evading!" Yularen shouted. "They're accepting casualties to close distance!" The bioships reached the defensive perimeter and began their assault. Some vomited swarms of smaller organisms that jetted through space using expelled gas. Others fired biological projectiles, compressed spores that detonated against shields with acidic fury. A few of the largest bioships simply rammed Republic vessels. Their carapaces hardened to withstand initial impact before boring creatures erupted from within. Anakin watched a Venator-class destroyer's shields collapse under sustained assault. Organisms breached the hull, and within minutes, the entire ship went dark. Through the Force, he felt the crew's terror, then silence. "All fighters, launch!" he commanded. "Keep those things away from our capital ships." Clone pilots poured from hangars in V-19 Torrents and ARC-170s. Separatist vulture droids joined them, their programming overridden with new targeting parameters. For the first time in the Clone Wars, Republic and Separatist fighters flew in mixed squadrons. Ahsoka Tano led one such squadron, her voice crackling over the comm. "Stay tight! These things are faster than they look!" She was right. The smaller organisms adapted their movement patterns mid-flight, learning from each missed shot. Her pilots were the best in the fleet, but they were fighting an enemy that improved with every passing second. A scream over the comm. One of her pilots, broadside, vanished in a flash of organic projectiles. His fighters spun out, consumed by organisms that clung to the hull like parasites. "Break formation!" Ahsoka shouted. "Don't let them swarm you!" On Ord Mantell's surface, the real battle was about to begin. The Republic had deployed its 501st Legion, Anakin's personal battalion, alongside an experimental Separatist droid division equipped with incendiary weapons. Clone Captain Rex and the tactical droid TX-20 stood in the same command post, a situation neither had imagined possible. "Your droids better not shoot my men in the back," Rex said flatly. "My programming prioritizes threat elimination," TX-20 replied in its synthesized voice. "The organisms are currently the primary threat. Your soldiers are acceptable collateral." Rex's hand moved to his blaster. "Stand down, Captain." Obi-Wan's voice cut through the tension. The Jedi Master materialized from the shadows, his lightsaber already in hand. "We're all on the same side today. Let's try to remember that." The first organisms landed 20 kilometers from their position. Drop pods of living tissue that slammed into Ord Mantell's rocky surface and split open. Thousands of creatures poured out, their forms evolved from previous encounters. These were larger, more heavily armored, with biological weapons that fired superheated plasma. "Here they come," Rex said, raising his blaster rifle. Along the defensive line, clones and battle droids prepared to fire. The swarm charged. Blaster bolts and droid fire tore through the front ranks, but the creatures learned in real time. Survivors developed thicker carapaces, moved in unpredictable patterns, used fallen comrades as shields. They crossed the kill zone faster than tactical models predicted. Obi-Wan ignited his lightsaber and joined the line. His blue blade became a blur, deflecting organic projectiles and severing claws. Beside him, a super battle droid emptied its wrist-mounted blasters into the horde, then resorted to using its armored fists when ammunition ran dry. The two fought back-to-back, Jedi and droid, against an enemy that recognized no such distinctions. "They're flanking!" Rex shouted, pointing to organisms that had circled through a mining canyon. "Second platoon, redirect fire!" But second platoon was already engaged, struggling against a wave of flying organisms that descended from above. The battle became chaos, a desperate melee where species that had fought each other for years now died together against something far worse. In orbit, the fleet battle was turning. The bioships had lost hundreds of vessels but adapted their tactics. They no longer engaged directly. Instead, they released spores, microscopic organisms that drifted through the void and latched onto hull plating. Within minutes, entire sections of Republic and Separatist ships began dissolving from the inside out. "Shields don't stop them," Yularen reported. "The spores are too small. They're passing through our defensive screens." Anakin made a decision. "All ships, emergency jump to secondary coordinates. We can't hold this position. General, if we retreat, the organisms will reach the core worlds within... If we stay, we lose the fleet and they reach the core worlds anyway." Anakin's voice was sharp. "We need to regroup. Find another way." The fleet began its withdrawal, leaving Ord Mantell's surface forces to extract on their own. But as the ships prepared to jump to hyperspace, Admiral Yularen noticed something on the sensors. "General Skywalker, the bioships aren't pursuing. They're landing on Ord Mantell. All of them." Anakin watched the display with growing horror. 500 bioships descending to the planet's surface. Not to chase the fleeing troops, but to consume. Ord Mantell had a population of 4 million. "Get everyone off that planet," Anakin whispered. "Now!" On the surface, Rex received the evacuation order and cursed. "All forces, fall back to extraction points." "Move!" The clones and droids retreated in organized chaos, fighting a running battle against organisms that pursued with relentless hunger. Obi-Wan covered the retreat, his lightsaber never stopping. His connection to the Force stretched to its limit. He felt them then, millions of minds moving as one. Not individual thoughts, but a singular purpose. Consume, adapt, evolve, spread. And behind that terrible unity, something else. A presence vast beyond comprehension. A mind, if it could be called that stretched across light years. The hive mind itself, watching through a billion eyes, learning through a billion deaths. It saw him, recognized him as something different, something that touched the energy these creatures couldn't feel. And it was hungry for that, too. Obi-Wan stumbled, overwhelmed by the psychic pressure. Rex caught him, dragging the Jedi toward the last evacuation shuttle as organisms closed in from all sides. "Come on, General! We're not dying on this rock!" They made it aboard seconds before the ramp closed. The shuttle rocketed into orbit, joining the fleet's hyperspace jump. Behind them, Ord Mantell's lights began to go dark as the swarm consumed everything that lived. 6 hours later, 4 million people ceased to exist, and the swarm grew stronger. The rain fell in sheets across Kamino's endless ocean, just as it always had. But inside Tipoca City's pristine halls, something had changed. Clone troopers stood at every intersection, their DC-15 rifles held ready. Kaminoan scientists glanced nervously at tactical displays showing the organism's advance. The cloning facilities, the Republic's most vital military asset, had become a fortress. Shak Ti walked the observation platforms overlooking the cloning chambers, her presence a calm center in the growing storm. Below her, thousands of growth pods held the Republic's future, unborn soldiers who would never see deployment if the swarm reached Kamino. "Master Jedi!" Lama Su's reedy voice interrupted her meditation. The Prime Minister of Kamino glided forward, his black eyes unreadable. "We have received disturbing intelligence." The organisms have consumed 3 agricultural worlds in the past rotation. They grow exponentially. At this rate, they'll be here within a week, Shock Tai finished. I'm aware. The Jedi Council has authorized me to implement emergency protocols. And what protocols might save us from creatures that adapt to every weapon? Lama Su's voice carried something Shock T had never heard from a Kaminoan before. Fear. Before she could answer, alarms shrieked through the facility. Every clone trooper snapped to attention. On the tactical displays, a single bioship had emerged from hyperspace at the system's edge, alone, but moving with purpose directly toward Kamino. One ship? Commander Colt, leader of the Advanced Recon Commandos, studied the display with suspicion. That's not an attack pattern. It's reconnaissance. Shock T closed her eyes, reaching through the Force. The bioship pulsed with life, thousands of organisms, but more than that, purpose, intelligence. They're probing our defenses, learning what we have before the main fleet arrives. Then we don't let it leave, Colt said. He activated the comm. All defense platforms, target that vessel, fire on my mark. Kamino's orbital defenses lit up. Turbo laser batteries and missile pods unleashed coordinated fire. The bioship took hits. Its carapace cracked. Ichor vented into space, but it didn't retreat. Instead, it released its payload. Hundreds of organisms jetted toward Kamino's surface, their bodies adapting mid-flight to become more aerodynamic. Most burned up in atmospheric entry, but dozens survived, crashing into the ocean far from Tipoca City. "Track them!" Colt ordered. "I want gunships on those impact sites now!" But the organisms didn't surface. Kamino's oceans were deep. Some trenches dropped kilometers into crushing darkness. The creatures had vanished into those depths, and the Republic's scanners couldn't penetrate the water's density. "They're hiding," Shock Tai said quietly. "Studying us from below. And when the main fleet arrives, they'll know exactly where to strike." In the Republic's temporary command center on Coruscant, the Jedi Council convened via hologram. Masters scattered across the galaxy reported the same pattern: reconnaissance missions, single bioships probing defenses at critical locations. Coruscant, Corellia, Fondor, every major shipyard and population center was being studied. "Calculating they are," Yoda said gravely. "Random expansion this is not. Strategic, purposeful. The hive mind plans its assault." Mace Windu's hologram flickered with interference. "We've lost contact with 3 more Republic battle groups. The organisms are isolating our fleets, destroying them piecemeal. If we don't consolidate our forces..." "Consolidation is exactly what they want," Ki Adimundi interrupted. "They're hurting us, forcing us into defensive positions while they consume everything else." Anakin's hologram appeared, his expression dark. "Then we stop playing defense. We take the fight to them, find wherever they're spawning these bioships and destroy it." "We don't know where that is," Obi-Wan said. "They could be breeding on any of the consumed worlds, or all of them." "Then we track them," Anakin insisted. "Follow a bioship back to its origin. Plant a tracker or—" "General Skywalker!" Admiral Yularen's voice cut in urgently. "We're receiving a transmission. You need to hear this." The Council fell silent as the audio played. At first, it was just static, electromagnetic noise, but underneath, something else. A pattern, repeating, almost like language, Obi-Wan breathed. "They're trying to communicate." The transmission resolved into images, holographic fragments showing consumed worlds, Republic fleets, Jedi wielding lightsabers. And then, impossibly, a voice. Not organic, not mechanical. Something synthesized from 1,000 different species' vocal cords. "Biomass, resources, evolution. You resist. Futile. Consumption inevitable. Join the perfection. Become the swarm." The transmission ended. The council chamber was utterly silent. Finally, Plo Koon spoke. They're not mindless. They've been learning our languages, our technology. They're offering us a choice. There is no choice, Mace said harshly. Assimilation is extinction by another name. But Anakin was staring at the static display with calculating eyes. Wait, if they can communicate, maybe we can negotiate. Buy time while we develop weapons that can negotiate with an entity whose entire existence is predicated on consuming us? Obi-Wan shook his head. Anakin, these aren't politicians or warriors. They're a force of nature. You can't bargain with a hurricane. Then what do we do? Ahsoka asked, her voice small. Just wait for them to overwhelm us? Yoda's eyes closed. The ancient Jedi Master had been meditating on this question since the crisis began. Now, finally, he had an answer, though it brought him no comfort. A weapon? There is. Forbidden, dangerous, but perhaps necessary. Every master turned to him. Master Yoda, Mace said carefully. What weapon? In the archives, buried deep, from the wars with the ancient Sith, technology that unmakes life itself, the Desolator Protocol. Yoda's voice was heavy with regret. Worlds it can sterilize, all organic matter, destroyed, even the Force presence, silenced. The implications hung in the air like a death sentence. You're talking about genocide on a galactic scale, Ki-Adi-Mundi said. The Jedi Order swore never to use such weapons. And if we don't? Yoda asked quietly. Extinct. All life becomes. The swarm consumes until nothing remains. Better to destroy worlds ourselves than let them feed the enemy. This is exactly what the Sith would do, Obi-Wan said. We'd be becoming the very thing we fight against. No, Mace said firmly. The Sith destroy for power. We'd be destroying to save what remains. There's a difference. Is there? Shakti's hologram flickered from Kamino. Once we cross that line, how do we come back? How do we remain guardians of peace after committing such an atrocity? The debate raged for hours. Jedi philosophy against pragmatic survival. Ethics against extinction. When the vote finally came, it passed by a single voice. The Desolator Protocol would be activated. But first, they needed to test it. And that meant choosing a world to sacrifice. A populated planet already under assault that could serve as proof the weapon worked. That world was Ryloth, home of the Twi'leks. 2 billion souls still fighting desperately against the encroaching swarm. When the decision reached the ryloth resistance, their leader, Cham Syndulla, transmitted a single message to the Jedi Council. We understand. We choose to die free rather than become part of that thing. But Jedi, when this is over, you remember what you did here. You remember every single one of us. The Republic fleet gathered in orbit. The Desolator device was ancient technology, barely understood, powered by focused, dark-side energy channeled through kyber crystals. It violated every principle the Jedi stood for. But as the bioships descended on Ryloth's last cities, the order was given. The device activated. Across the planet's surface, all organic matter began to break down at the molecular level. The swarm dissolved. Plants withered. Animals collapsed. And the Twi'lek people, every man, woman, and child still on the surface, ceased to exist in an instant of terrible, silent death. The bioships in orbit convulsed and died, cut off from the hive mind's presence on the surface. In the Force, Shakti felt 2 billion lights extinguish simultaneously. She fell to her knees in Kamino's command center, tears streaming down her face. The weapon worked. But in that moment, the Jedi Order lost something far more valuable than 2 billion lives. They lost their souls. And across the galaxy, In his hidden chambers on Coruscant, Darth Sidious smiled. The Jedi had finally embraced the dark side's pragmatism. Their fall was no longer a matter of if, but when. The swarm would be defeated, but the Jedi might not survive their victory. The Republic Star Destroyer. Vengeance hung in orbit above Kamino, its hull scarred from a dozen encounters with bioships. On its bridge, Anakin Skywalker watched the tactical display with hollow eyes. 3 days had passed since ryloth's sterilization. 3 days since the Jedi Order had become executioners. "General, we're detecting massive hyperspace signatures," a clone officer reported. "Multiple contacts, hundreds of them." The main fleet had arrived. Bioships emerged from hyperspace in a coordinated wave, not the disorganized swarm of earlier encounters, but a formation that spoke of terrifying intelligence. They'd learned fleet tactics, learned coordination, and now they were applying those lessons to the Republic's most vital target. "All ships, battle stations," Anakin commanded. His voice was flat, emotionless. "Activate the Desolator device." Below, on Kamino's surface, the Kaminoans had worked frantically to construct a planetary-scale version of the ryloth weapon. If the swarm reached the cloning facilities, the Republic would lose its ability to replace losses. This had to work. But as the bioships approached, something changed. They didn't charge blindly like before. They split into multiple attack vectors, probing different sections of the defense perimeter, testing, searching for weaknesses. "They know," Rex said quietly beside Anakin. "They know we have a weapon." "How could they possibly—" Anakin stopped. The reconnaissance missions, the lone bioships that had probed their defenses. The swarm had been gathering intelligence, and now it was adapting its strategy. The lead bioships suddenly accelerated, sacrificing themselves against Kamino's orbital defenses. Their deaths created gaps in the defensive fire, gaps the following waves exploited with precision that made Anakin's blood run cold. "They're using suicide tactics," Admiral Yularen said, his voice shaking. "Calculated sacrifice to create openings. General, these things are thinking." No, Anakin realized. Not thinking. Being thought. Somewhere behind this attack, the hive mind was processing information from billions of organisms across dozens of systems. It was learning faster than the Republic could adapt. A squadron of bioships broke through the orbital defense, diving toward Kamino's surface. They ignored Tipoca City and headed straight for the ocean, toward the coordinates where the reconnaissance organisms had vanished days earlier. "Those creatures in the water," Shaak Ti's voice crackled over the comm. "They've been breeding, building. There's something down there. Something massive." The ocean erupted. A biostructure the size of a city rose from Kamino's depths, a living hive that had been growing in secret for 3 days. Organisms poured from its chambers in the millions, adapted specifically for Kamino's environment. Aquatic variants that swam through the rain with terrifying speed. Flying forms that navigated the perpetual storms. "How?" Rex breathed. "How did they build that so fast?" "Exponential growth," Shaak Ti answered, her lightsaber already ignited as organisms breached Tipoca City's lower levels. They consumed the ocean's biomass, every fish, every microorganism, converted it all into that. The battle became chaos. Clones fought room to room as organisms infiltrated the cloning facilities. Kaminoans fled through corridors, their elegant forms torn apart by scything claws. The carefully ordered world of Tipoca City descended into a nightmare of blood and chitin. Anakin watched from orbit, helpless. "Activate the Desolator, now!" "General, our forces are still on the surface," Yularen protested. "I know! Do it anyway!" The device powered up, kyber crystals pulsing with terrible dark energy. But the bioships had anticipated this. 3 massive organisms, larger than anything previously encountered, rammed the Vengeance simultaneously. Their carapaces had been reinforced, hardened against turbolaser fire. they latched onto the Star Destroyer's hull and began boring through. "Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12, a clone officer shouted. "The Desolator is on deck 9! They're heading straight for it!" Anakin ran. His lightsaber ignited as he sprinted through corridors, Rex and a squad of clones at his heels. They reached Deck 9 to find organisms already swarming around the Desolator device. But these weren't mindless beasts. They were dismantling the weapon with disturbing precision, tearing apart components as if they understood its function. "They know what it does," Rex said, horror in his voice. "They're destroying it." Anakin charged into the swarm, his lightsaber a blue whirlwind. Organisms fell in pieces. But more kept coming. They'd adapted even to lightsabers now. Some had developed carapaces that could withstand brief contact with the plasma blade. A massive organism emerged from the breach point, a command variant. Its bioelectric presence coordinating the others. Multiple eyes focused on Anakin, and through the Force he felt something reach toward him. Not thought, not emotion, just hunger, recognition. The hive mind seeing him through this creature's senses. And in that moment of connection, Anakin understood. The swarm wasn't evil, wasn't cruel. It simply existed to consume and evolve. Every species it absorbed made it stronger, more complex. It had started as simple organisms, but with each world devoured, it had grown more intelligent. By now it had consumed hundreds of species, incorporated their knowledge, their instincts, their survival mechanisms. It was becoming something unprecedented, something that transcended individual life, and it wanted the Force sensitives most of all. Anakin severed the connection and attacked the command organism with renewed fury. His strikes carved deep gouges, but the creature fought back with multiple limbs, forcing him to give ground. Behind him, Rex and his clones poured fire into the swarm, trying to hold them back from the Desolator device. On Kamino's surface, Shaak Ti made her own desperate stand. She'd gathered every Jedi and clone in Tipoca City's central chamber, the last defensible position. Around them, organisms pressed from all sides. The sounds of their claws against durasteel was a constant skittering nightmare. "Master!" Commander Colt said, his armor dented and scorched. "We're out of options. We need to evacuate." "There is no evacuation," Shaak Ti said quietly. "If we leave, they take the cloning facilities. They study our genetics, learn to replicate clones. The swarm would gain everything that makes our army effective. Then what do we do?" Shaak Ti looked at the growth chambers visible through the transparasteel walls. Thousands of unborn clones, their potential futures stolen by circumstance. "We destroy it all," she said. "Set the reactors to overload. If we can't have Kamino, neither can they." Colt hesitated, then nodded. "For the Republic." "For every living being in the galaxy," Shaak Ti corrected. She ignited her lightsaber, its green glow reflecting in her eyes. "Now we hold the line long enough for the charges to be set. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir." The defense lasted 14 minutes. Clones fought until their ammunition ran dry, then fought with their fists. Shaak Ti's lightsaber never stopped moving. Her connection to the Force stretched beyond anything she'd attempted before. She felt every clone's death, every organism's hunger, the terrible weight of 2 billion Twi'lek souls still haunting her conscience. When the reactor charges reached critical mass, Colt transmitted the evacuation code. Shuttles launched from undamaged platforms, carrying what few survivors remained. Shaak Ti was among the last to leave, standing in the hangar as organisms poured through every entrance. She reached out through the Force one final time, touching the minds of every being on Kamino, clone, Kaminoan, and even the swarm itself. For just an instant, she felt the hive mind's vast consciousness. It recognized her, recognized what she was about to do, and it was afraid. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the unborn clones, to the Kaminoans. To everything this war had cost. Then she boarded the last shuttle and gave the command. Kamino's reactors detonated in a chain reaction that lit up the entire system. The oceanic world, source of the Republic's clone army, ceased to exist in a sphere of nuclear fire. The biohive, the organisms, the facilities, all of it vaporized in an instant. In orbit, Anakin felt the explosion through the Force, felt thousands of lives end, and felt, for just a moment, the hive mind recoil. It had lost something. Not just biomass, but knowledge, strategic positioning. A foothold it couldn't quickly replace. The swarm had suffered its first true defeat. But as the vengeance limped away from Kamino's burning remnants, Anakin looked at his reflection in the viewport and didn't recognize what he saw. The Jedi had destroyed 2 worlds now, sacrificed billions, and the war was far from over. "General," Rex said quietly, "was it worth it?" Anakin had no answer. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant stood as it had for millennia, a beacon of light and wisdom at the heart of the Republic. But inside its meditation chambers, darkness gathered. Not the calculated malice of the Sith, but something worse: despair. Master Yoda sat alone in the central chamber, his ancient form diminished by the weight of recent decisions. Through the Force, he felt the shadow spreading. Not just the swarm's physical advance, but the corruption of everything the Jedi Order represented. They had become destroyers, executioners, the very thing they'd sworn to oppose. "Failed, we have," he whispered to the empty chamber. "Lost our way, the Jedi have." The door opened. Mace Windu entered, his expression carved from stone. "Master Yoda, the Council has reconvened. Chancellor Palpatine is demanding a full strategic briefing." "Of course he is," Yoda said bitterly. "Orchestrating," he continues, "while we dance to his tune, blind to the true darkness." Mace's jaw tightened. "We don't have the luxury of paranoia right now. The swarm has consumed 40% of the Outer Rim. If we don't consolidate our remaining forces..." "Consolidate for what?" Yoda's eyes opened, fierce despite his exhaustion. "Victory? Survival? Or merely to choose the manner of our extinction?" Before Mace could respond, alarms shrieked through the temple. On every display, the same horrifying image appeared. Bioships emerging from hyperspace. Not at the Outer Rim, not at distant colonies. Directly above Coruscant. The core world, the Republic's capital, home to 1 trillion souls. And the swarm had finally arrived. Across the planet city, panic erupted. Civilians fled through streets that had never known invasion. The Coruscant Defense Fleet, depleted by years of clone wars, scrambled to intercept. But the bioships numbered in the thousands, and they'd learned from every previous engagement. They descended through Coruscant's atmosphere in coordinated waves, targeting specific districts, government centers, industrial zones, and most critically, the Jedi Temple itself. "They're not attacking randomly," Obi-Wan realized, watching from the Temple's command center. "They're eliminating leadership, command structure. They want to decapitate the Republic in a single strike." Anakin ignited his lightsaber, Ahsoka at his side. "Then we give them a fight they won't forget." The Temple's defenses activated, turrets rising from hidden emplacements, ray shields flickering to life. But the organisms adapted mid-descent, their carapaces thickening against the anti-aircraft fire. They crashed through the upper levels with devastating force, biological acid eating through durasteel and stone. Jedi across the temple mobilized. Masters, knights, and Padawans formed defensive lines in the ancient halls. For 1,000 generations, this had been a place of peace and learning. Now it became a battlefield. The organisms poured through breaches like a living flood. But these weren't the mindless beasts from early encounters. These moved with tactical precision, flanking defenders, targeting Force sensitives specifically. The hive mind had studied the Jedi and developed organisms specifically designed to hunt them. Anakin met the first wave in the temple's grand hall, his lightsaber carving through chitin and flesh. But for every organism he killed, 2 more emerged. They were learning his fighting style in real time, adapting to his attack patterns. "They're predicting my moves," he shouted to Obi-Wan. "It's like fighting someone who knows what I'm going to do before I do it." "Because they've studied us," Obi-Wan replied, his own blade a blur of defense. "Every Jedi they've encountered, every fighting style, the hive mind has absorbed and analyzed it all." In the council chambers, Yoda faced a nightmare. A massive command organism had broken through, its multiple eyes fixed on the ancient Jedi Master. Around it, smaller creatures moved in perfect coordination, blocking every escape route. "So," Yoda said quietly, his lightsaber igniting with a snap hiss of green light. "The heart of the swarm. You seek. End the Jedi, and the Republic falls. Clever. But underestimate us, you do." The creature lunged. Yoda moved like water, his small form belying impossible speed and power. His lightsaber struck with surgical precision, severing limbs and carving through carapace. But the organism adapted even as it fought, its regenerative capabilities repairing damage almost as fast as Yoda could inflict it. "Learn from pain, you do," Yoda observed, breathing heavily. "But pain you do not truly feel, merely data, information to process." He reached out through the Force, not to attack, but to understand. "What are you? Why consume? Why destroy?" For a moment, through the Force, Yoda touched something vast, the hive mind itself, and in that contact, he saw its truth. The swarm had no origin story, no homeworld. It simply was, an evolutionary imperative given form. It consumed because consumption was its nature, as fundamental as stars burning or planets turning. To ask why the swarm devoured was like asking why gravity pulled or time flowed. It wasn't evil. It wasn't cruel. It was existence itself, expressing through hunger, and that made it unstoppable. The revelation nearly broke Yoda's concentration. The command organism seized the opportunity, its claws raking across his side. The ancient Jedi fell, his lightsaber skittering across the floor. Then Mace Windu was there, his purple blade intercepting the killing blow. "Master Yoda! Fall back! The temple is lost!" Around them, the battle was turning. Too many organisms, too few Jedi. The temple's halls, places of peace and meditation, ran with blood. "Evacuate the younglings!" Yoda gasped, clutching his wounded side. "The Padawans, all who can be saved." "And you?" Mace demanded. "Buy time, I will. Go!" But before Mace could argue, the entire temple shook. Something massive had landed on the roof, a bioship larger than any previously encountered. And from it emerged organisms that radiated psychic pressure like nothing the Jedi had felt before. "Synapse creatures," Obi-Wan breathed, feeling their presence through the Force. "Command variants. If we can kill them..." "The swarm loses coordination," Anakin finished. "Then that's our target." A desperate plan formed. While the majority of Jedi covered the evacuation, a strike team would ascend to the temple's highest point and engage the Synapse creatures directly. Anakin, Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, and Mace volunteered. Yoda, despite his injuries, insisted on joining them. They fought their way up through levels swarming with organisms. Each step was purchased with Jedi blood. Padawans fell defending their masters. Knights sacrificed themselves to hold choke points. The temple's 1,000-year legacy was being written in violence and loss. They reached the roof to find 3 massive synapse creatures waiting. Each was surrounded by hundreds of smaller organisms, all moving in perfect synchronization. And behind them, the bioship pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that almost looked like communication. "It's a trap," Obi-Wan said. "They wanted us here." "Of course," Mace replied grimly. "Kill the Jedi leadership, and the Republic loses its coordination. Just like we'd lose ours if we killed their command structure. The synapse creatures attacked in unison. The battle that followed was unlike anything in Jedi history. 5 masters against creatures that had absorbed the combat knowledge of hundreds of species. Lightsabers clashed against hardened carapace. Force pushes sent organisms tumbling, only for them to adapt and brace against the next push. Anakin felt something dark rising within him. Anger. Hatred. The organisms had taken so much. Worlds, lives, hope itself. He channeled that fury into his strikes, his blade moving faster than thought. "Anakin!" Obi-Wan's warning came too late. One of the synapse creatures had been studying Anakin specifically, learning his aggressive style. It caught his blade between reinforced claws and yanked, pulling the young Jedi off balance. Ahsoka's intervention saved him, her white blade severing the creature's limb. But the counterattack came instantly, a swarm of smaller organisms overwhelming her position. "Snips!" Anakin reached out through the Force, pulling her clear, but doing so left him open. The synapse creature's tail, a barbed appendage dripping with biotoxin, pierced his shoulder. Pain exploded through Anakin's body. Not just physical pain, but something worse. Through the toxin, he felt the hive mind's touch. It was trying to connect with him, trying to understand what made Force sensitives different. And in that moment of vulnerability, Anakin felt something else. The dark side, rising through his agony and rage, offering power, offering revenge. He could destroy these creatures. All of them. He just had to let go. Embrace the hatred. Become something more than a Jedi. "Anakin, no!" Obi-Wan's voice cut through the darkness. "Don't give in! Not now! Not like this!" Anakin teetered on the edge. The swarm represented everything he'd fought against. Mindless destruction, inevitable loss, the death of everyone he loved. He could end it. Right here. Right now. If he just... Yoda's hand touched his arm. The ancient master's presence in the Force was a lifeline, pulling Anakin back from the precipice. "Stronger than this, you are," Yoda said softly. "Give the darkness what it wants. We must not, even to save the galaxy." Anakin gasped, pulling back from the edge. Mace took advantage of the distraction, his Vapad technique channeling the darkness around them into devastating strikes that finally brought down the first synapse creature. Its death sent ripples through the swarm. The organisms faltered, their coordination disrupted. It was the opening they needed. Together, the 5 Jedi struck as one. Lightsabers and Force attacks overwhelmed the remaining synapse creatures. When the last one fell, the organisms across the temple went berserk, attacking without strategy, without coordination. They could be killed now, driven back. But the victory felt hollow. As Anakin surveyed the burning temple, the bodies of fallen Jedi, the screaming civilians in the streets below, he realized the truth. They'd won this battle. But the war was far from over, and the cost kept climbing. The Senate building burned. Across Coruscant's endless skyline, fires raged where bioships had crashed or organisms had breached defensive perimeters. The Republic's heart was bleeding, and every government in the galaxy knew it. If Coruscant could fall, nowhere was safe. In the ruins of the Jedi Temple's council chambers, the surviving masters gathered around a holographic display that painted a picture of galactic extinction. Red zones covered half the known galaxy now. Entire sectors gone silent. Trillions dead or assimilated. And the swarm continued to grow. "We're losing," Mace Windu said flatly. No optimism remained in his voice. "Every battle costs us resources we can't replace. Every world we sterilize weakens us as much as them. At this rate, the Republic has 3 months. Maybe 4. Then we change our approach," Obi-Wan said, though even he sounded uncertain. "The swarm has a weakness. It must. Everything does. Its weakness is that it learns too well," Ki-Adi-Mundi replied. Every tactic we employ becomes ineffective within days. It's an enemy that evolves faster than we can adapt. Anakin stood apart from the others, his wounded shoulder bound but still aching. The toxin had been purged, but the memory of the hive mind's touch lingered. He'd felt its vastness, intelligence distributed across countless organisms, processing information from 1,000 battlefronts simultaneously. But he'd also felt something else, a limitation. "It's not unlimited," Anakin said suddenly. All eyes turned to him. "The hive mind. When I connected with it, I felt strain, like it was managing too many things at once. It's vast, but it's not infinite." Yoda's ears perked up. "Explain, you must." "The synapse creatures coordinate the swarm, right? They're like relay points, command nodes." Anakin's tactical mind was racing now. The hive mind processes information from billions of organisms, but it has to route that information through the synapse creatures. If we could overload that network, hit multiple synapse nodes simultaneously across the galaxy, the swarm would lose coordination. Obi-Wan finished, understanding dawning. They'd revert to instinct, become vulnerable. "But we'd need to strike everywhere at once," Mace said. "With what forces? We've lost half our fleet. The clone army is depleted. The Separatists face the same extinction." A new voice interrupted. Count Dooku's hologram materialized, transmitted from his flagship. Behind him, General Grievous loomed like a mechanical specter. "And we have resources you lack. Droid armies that can be manufactured quickly. Battle tactics unencumbered by concern for casualties." "You're proposing a unified command," Obi-Wan said carefully. "Republic and Separatist forces operating as a single military." "I'm proposing survival." Dooku's expression was unreadable. "The political ideologies that divide us are meaningless if we're all dead. My master agrees." The mention of Dooku's master, the mysterious Sith Lord, sent ripples through the council. But before anyone could respond, Chancellor Palpatine's hologram appeared. "The Senate has voted," Palpatine announced, his voice carrying authority that brooked no argument. "Emergency powers have been granted to create a unified galactic defense force. Republic, Separatist, neutral systems. All military assets will be placed under joint command for the duration of this crisis." "And who," Mace asked quietly, "will command this unified force?" Palpatine's smile was thin. "The Jedi Council, in cooperation with Separatist military leadership. You wanted unity, Masters. I'm giving it to you." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Palpatine had orchestrated the Clone Wars to divide the galaxy. Now he was uniting it against an enemy he couldn't control. But whether this was pragmatism or another layer of manipulation, no one could say. Over the following days, the impossible happened. Republic Star Destroyers flew alongside Separatist frigates. Clone troopers coordinated with battle droids. Jedi shared tactical data with Sith-trained commanders. The galaxy's greatest enemies became reluctant allies against a threat that made their differences trivial. The plan was audacious. Simultaneous strikes on every major swarm concentration point across 40 systems. Destroy the synapse creatures coordinating each region, and the hive mind would fracture. The organisms would lose their strategic cohesion and become vulnerable to conventional warfare. It would require every ship, every soldier, every force sensitive in the galaxy, and casualties would be catastrophic. But it was the only chance they had. Anakin stood in the hangar of the Resolute, now flagship of the combined fleet's Task Force 7. Around him, clones and battle droids prepared for deployment, an impossible sight just months ago. Rex approached, his armor bearing new scars from Coruscant. "Never thought I'd be fighting alongside clankers," Rex said. "Never thought we'd be fighting for survival of all organic life," Anakin replied. "Strange times." General, if this doesn't work, it has to work. There's no alternative. Anakin's hand drifted to his lightsaber. The swarm thinks it's inevitable. That consumption is destiny. We're going to prove it wrong. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. On Geonosis, Jedi and Separatist commanders planned assaults. On Kashyyyk, Wookiees prepared for desperate last stands. On Mandalore, warriors who had remained neutral sharpened their blades and loaded their weapons. The galaxy was uniting, and the hive mind felt it. Through billions of organisms, across thousands of systems, the vast intelligence that coordinated the swarm recognized what was happening. The prey had stopped running, stopped fragmenting. They were organizing, consolidating, preparing for a final confrontation. The hive mind adapted. Bioships across the galaxy received new genetic coding. Synapse creatures underwent rapid evolution, developing redundancies and backup communication networks. The swarm had learned from every previous defeat. Now it would demonstrate the ultimate lesson. Evolution was inevitable. Adaptation was survival. And the swarm had evolved to be unkillable. The day of the coordinated strike arrived. Across 40 systems simultaneously, Republic and Separatist forces engaged the swarm. Space battles of unprecedented scale erupted. Planetary invasions became desperate melees where species that had never met fought side by side. Anakin led the assault on the primary hive concentration in the Tingle Arm, a region where the swarm had converted 6 entire star systems into breeding grounds. His task force dropped out of hyperspace to find bioships numbering in the tens of thousands. "All ships, engage at will," he commanded. "Target the largest organisms first. Those are the synapse creatures." The battle was chaos. Ships on both sides died by the hundreds. But for every vessel lost, the defenders destroyed dozens of bioships. Slowly, impossibly, they were winning. On the surface of the primary hive world, Obi-Wan led a ground assault with Grievous at his side, an alliance neither would have believed possible. They fought through kilometers of living tissue, tunneling toward the massive synapse creature at the hive's core. "Strange," Grievous said, his mechanical voice crackling over the comm. "Fighting alongside a Jedi." "Stranger still that you haven't tried to kill me," Obi-Wan replied, his lightsaber carving through a wall of organic matter. "The day is young." They reached the central chamber to find a synapse creature the size of a building, its body pulsing with bioelectric energy that coordinated millions of organisms across the region. Around it, smaller creatures formed a living wall of defense. "Together?" Obi-Wan asked. Grievous ignited 4 lightsabers, trophies from fallen Jedi. "Together!" They attacked in perfect synchronization. Jedi and Sith-trained cyborg, united by necessity. The synapse creature fought with desperate intelligence, but it couldn't defend against their combined assault. When Obi-Wan's blade finally pierced its central nerve cluster, the psychic backlash was palpable. Across the Tingle Arm, organisms faltered. The hive mind's coordination in that sector collapsed. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Yoda on Ryloth's rebuilt colonies, Mace Windu in the unknown regions, Shock Tai defending what remained of Kamino's survivors, Ahsoka leading clone forces on Christophsis. 40 synapse superorganisms died within hours of each other. And the hive mind screamed. Not with sound, but with psychic force that every force sensitive in the galaxy felt simultaneously. It was pain, confusion, and something else. Something that almost resembled fear. The swarm began to retreat. Not flee, but withdraw in organized fashion, abandoning conquered territories and consolidating in the deep core. The organisms were regrouping, reforming, preparing for a final evolution. In the aftermath, Anakin stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching bioships disappear into hyperspace. They'd won, driven back the swarm, saved countless worlds. but Obi-Wan's expression was troubled. They're not defeated. They're adapting, learning from this loss. Then we hit them again, Anakin said, before they can evolve countermeasures. With what forces? Yoda's hologram appeared, the ancient master looking more exhausted than Anakin had ever seen. United, the galaxy was. But at what cost? Fleets destroyed, armies decimated, resources exhausted. The truth settled over them like a shroud. They'd won this battle, but the war had devastated both sides. The Republic was a shell of its former self. The Separatists were shattered. The Jedi Order had lost hundreds of masters and knights. And the Clone Wars, the political conflict that had consumed the galaxy for 3 years, seemed almost quaint compared to the horrors they'd faced. What happens now? Ahsoka asked quietly. In his hidden chambers on Coruscant, Darth Sidious contemplated the same question. The galaxy was united, but broken. The Jedi were traumatized, but victorious. His carefully orchestrated plans had been derailed by an enemy he couldn't manipulate. But Sith were nothing if not adaptable. The swarm has taught us something valuable, he murmured to the darkness. That unity, even reluctant unity, is powerful. But unity is also fragile. He activated his holo transmitter, began issuing orders. The Clone Wars would resume, but differently now, more subtly. While the galaxy remained focused on the swarm's potential return, he would work in the shadows. After all, the best time to strike was when everyone believed the danger had passed. The battle against the Tyranid swarm had changed the galaxy forever. 6 months after the coordinated strikes, the Republic and Separatist alliance remained, not through trust, but through necessity. The swarm had retreated to the deep core, silent but not defeated. Long-range scans detected massive biostructures growing in those uncharted regions, organisms evolving in darkness, preparing for something the unified forces could only guess at. The Jedi Temple was rebuilt, but its halls felt emptier. Of the 10,000 Jedi who had served before the crisis, fewer than 6,000 remained. They had become warriors in truth now, their philosophy of peace and meditation forever tainted by the worlds they'd sterilized. The billions they'd sacrificed. Master Yoda spent his days in solitude, meditating on questions that had no answers. Could the Jedi return to what they were? Should they? The clone army had been reduced by half. Kamino's destruction meant no new clones could be produced at the scale needed. The Republic turned to conscription, recruiting citizens who had watched their worlds nearly consumed. These soldiers fought differently than clones, with fear, yes, but also with desperate determination. They'd seen what extinction looked like. The Separatists had fared no better. Count Dooku's forces were a shadow of their former strength, droid foundries converted to produce weapons designed specifically for anti-swarm warfare. General Grievous had become an unlikely symbol of galactic resistance. The cyborg who had fought alongside Jedi and survived. His collection of lightsabers remained, but he spoke less of killing Jedi now. There were greater threats. Chancellor Palpatine's emergency powers remained in effect. The Senate, traumatized by Coruscant's near fall, had granted him unprecedented authority. He spoke of rebuilding, of eternal vigilance, of a new galactic order that could never again be caught unprepared. Few questioned him. The alternative, chaos in the face of returning swarm, was too terrifying to consider. But Anakin Skywalker questioned. In quiet moments, when he stood at the observation windows of the rebuilt temple, he remembered the hive mind's touch. Remembered the dark side's whisper during his moment of vulnerability. The galaxy had united against extinction, yes, but at what cost to its soul? Obi-Wan found him there one evening, watching ships move through Coruscant's sky lanes. "You're troubled." "We won," Anakin said. "But it doesn't feel like victory." "Because it isn't. Not yet." Obi-Wan joined him at the window. "The swarm is still out there, growing, learning, and when it returns, and it will return, we'll have to face it again. But next time, it will have adapted to everything we threw at it. Then we adapt too, evolve, become something strong enough to stand against them. Or become something we don't recognize. Obi-Wan's voice was quiet. The Jedi destroyed worlds, Anakin. We became executioners. Can we ever go back to being guardians of peace? Anakin had no answer. In the deep core, beyond the reach of Republic or Separatist sensors, the swarm continued its work. The hive mind had learned valuable lessons. Unity was strength. Coordination was survival. But it had also learned something more profound. The galaxy's defenders were divided by philosophy, by politics, by the very individuality that made them weak. Next time, the swarm would not simply consume, it would divide, isolate, turn the prey's strengths into weaknesses. And when it returned, it would bring an evolution the galaxy could never have anticipated. The Clone Wars had been a conflict of politics and ideology. The Swarm War, as historians would later call these 6 months, had been a fight for survival itself. But in the quiet that followed, as the galaxy rebuilt and prepared for what might come, a new question emerged. Had they really won? Or had they simply survived the first wave of something far worse? In the Jedi archives, ancient texts spoke of cycles, civilizations rising and falling, consumed by forces beyond their understanding. The galaxy had faced extinction before and survived, but each survival had changed what it meant to be alive in the galaxy far, far away. The Tyranids had shown them their fragility, their mortality, the terrible truth that for all their technology and force sensitivity, they were still just organic matter, fuel for a hunger that transcended morality. Some nights, in meditation, Yoda felt the shadow still spreading, felt the future branching into darkness. The swarm would return. Palpatine would continue his manipulations. The Jedi would struggle with what they'd become. And through it all, the galaxy would have to find the strength to endure, or learn what true extinction meant. The war against the Tyranids wasn't over. It had merely paused. And in that pause, the galaxy held its breath, wondering if unity forged in desperation could survive when the immediate threat receded. Wondering if old enemies could truly become allies. Wondering if the cost of survival was worth the price paid in innocence, in philosophy, in souls. The Force offered no answers. Only the certainty that darkness still gathered, that hunger still waited, that somewhere in the deep core, something vast and terrible was evolving. And when it emerged again, the galaxy would discover whether the lessons learned in blood and fire had been enough. The story of the Tyranid invasion was far from over. It had simply entered a new chapter, one written in the shadows between stars, where hunger dreamed of consumption and unity struggled against entropy. May the Force be with them all. They would need it. More stories await.